Welcome to Success Is Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Portman, serial entrepreneur, author, and podcast host. Whether success for you is more money, time with your family, a healthy, well-balanced life, or freedom, I'm interviewing guests and getting you the advice to make it happen. So join me as we uncomplicate the complicated, help you define success, and give you the strategies to make it happen. Hi, and thank you for joining us today on the Success Is Podcast. Today, joining me is Jaimie Beebe. Jaimie is a casting director, podcast host, and the owner of the Boyfriend Bikini. Thank you for joining us today, Jaimie.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So tell me, what does success mean to you?
Well, to me personally, success is being able to do what I want, when I want, how I want, which basically means I'm not stuck in an office. I'm not working on things I don't want to work on. I get to be creative and I get to travel. I think the number one thing is like success to me is traveling constantly. I travel all the time.
Yeah. So being you've talked about this before, being a single woman traveling, obviously in not some of the best areas in the world, that's got to be a little bit dangerous, isn't it?
I don't think so. In fact, I was talking to a friend last night, a girlfriend, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, like you went to Mexico alone?" I'm like, Mexico is the least of the countries that I've been to alone. As long as you're aware and just not like, out there flashing jewelry and stuff, then you'll be fine. I mean, living in LA, I think Hollywood Boulevard is much more terrifying than any country I've been to. I mean, I think I have a better chance of getting stabbed or shot on Hollywood Boulevard, at least robbed on Hollywood Boulevard, which is sad for my city. But no, I think that, especially being a tourist, and most of the countries I go to, I'm an obvious tourist, blue eyes, blonde hair. The last thing that they want is like news and, things like that surrounding a tourist getting hurt or robbed or killed or something, going missing. Although I will say, I find it fascinating when people do go missing or get killed while they're on vacation, which leads me into my newest podcast that I've been working on, which is when people get killed or go missing on vacation.
So this is different than the stalking.
Yeah,
podcast?
It's not out yet. I've been working on it. I have recorded a couple of episodes. I'm super excited. It's kind of like my little baby, I guess. It's brand new. I'm excited to put it out there.
What triggered this? Was there a specific incident that triggered this, or?
I mean, yes, there was. I don't know if you remember, but there was a guy who got killed on vacation in Mexico. And it just made huge news because he got killed in a really strange way. Like they found his body in like the hotel next door, like stuffed in a window. Like it was just a really odd thing. And he was like there with his wife on their anniversary, and he had like gone out for one last drink at night and then never came back. And the police there were like, "Oh, it was an accident. Like he fell, and died." Because they don't want that kind of news story because it'll affect tourism. And so I was reading the comments, because the comments are always my favorite in things like this, or in anything. Just read the comments. People are insane. So I was reading the comments, and everyone was just like, there was so many comments like, "Well, that's what happens if you go to Mexico." I'm like, no, that is literally not what happens if you go to Mexico. Like, it's quite hard to die on vacation, was my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I was like, well, is it hard to die on vacation? So I started looking it up, and yes and no. I think that people, when they're on vacation, and this goes back to being safe, like they let all their aware levels go. They're not watching out for what they're doing. They're drinking too much. They're, driving a moped drunk on an island somewhere. They're doing all these things that they wouldn't normally do. So I think that there is, in a way, you can get killed or go missing a little easier on vacation because you're just not living your life in the most aware way that you normally would at home. But the comments are just so absurd. Just like, well, yeah, like everyone I've known that went to Mexico died too. Like, no,
No, they didn't.
like, that does
Yeah.
not
Who?
happen, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
comments and it, and our country is very there's a lot of people in our country that only love our country, which is also absurd.
Yeah.
And so I think that was where the type of people where the comments were coming from. But it just got me thinking, and I'm like, people literally think like this. So let me give them what they want. Like, let's see if that's really out there. And it is, and there's a lot of mysteries, there's a lot of people that go missing for many different reasons on vacation. And so I found it fascinating, and that's what I've been working on a little bit lately.
So are you going to be interviewing like family of the victims, or what's your thought on that?
Not yet.
Yeah.
So far I'm just basically telling the story. It really adds, it's hard to interview people, as you know, for a podcast. I mean, and I already have Strictly Stalking, which we interview victims, survivors of stalkers, and that is really, really intense. It takes a lot to do that, especially I'm hearing people's stories about like the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
Yeah.
It's emotional, it's intense, it drains me to feel, I guess, like to feel that much empathy all the time. So I don't think that I would be able to do another podcast like that, just personally. It's hard.
Emotionally draining. Yeah.
Yeah. So for this one, I'm just kind of telling the story. And then, there's a lot of missing people and stuff. So what I'm hoping is, maybe someone will hear it and be like, oh, I saw this person the day before they went missing and they were doing this, or, who knows, like things like that have happened. Or somebody out there hears something along the grapevine, like, oh, I know what happened to that person, and they decide to come forward. Who knows? But yeah, that's it's just too draining to have to interview people again.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's touch on your Strictly Stalking podcast.
Yeah.
How did that start? Were you personally a victim, or did you know somebody, or what happened with that?
No, not at all. So I listen to podcasts, true crime podcasts all the time. I love it. I love true crime. And I had called my business partner to I'm a very dramatic person. We'll start out like that. And my business partner is not, like, he's super logical. He's like down to earth, quiet, all that kind of stuff. Right. So I called him and I was like, well, I wanted to do a true crime podcast, but all the good murders are already taken. I'm never going to do a podcast. My life is over. Like, very dramatic. And he was like, well, no one's doing a podcast about stalking. Like, I don't know if he just pulled it out of thin air. I don't know. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about stalking. That's dumb. I'm not going to do that. Or like hang up on him. And then what always happens when he gives me these ideas, that I start thinking about it. And I was like, well, shit, like he's probably right. So I start researching it. And then I was like blown away, like by what stalking is. There's the laws have not caught up, like all the things that are happening. Each story is different. So we started doing the podcast, and then it just turned into something totally different, but that I wasn't expecting. Like now we're just like advocates for, stalking awareness, and we're trying to change laws. And, when I say it's draining in a good way, but it's a lot of work, like beyond the podcast. Like the podcast is, it's great because it's getting the word out there. But then, behind the scenes, like the other day, I spoke to this woman who I'm genuinely afraid for her life, and she doesn't have any kind of family support system where she's at and stuff. And, so then after talking to her, I'm going back and, trying to get her in touch with these people who can help her in this state. And, so it's a lot. But it's great. And it turned into that, it turned into this like community that I didn't know existed, and most people don't want to be in. But I think that we're doing a lot of good, which is super cool. I just didn't see that coming.
No, that's amazing. I would think technology could be helping to fuel a lot of the stalking that's going on. I mean, I was reading articles about like the air tags and stuff like that. Yeah. And is that what you're running into a lot? Technology playing into that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, technology really does come into play big time, but it also kind of goes both ways. I was interviewing a family actually the other day, and they had been stalked years ago before like cell phones were really that popular. And it was actually it's a crazy story. The parents are blind. The kids are not. They had 3 young children, and their stalker was coming into their house.
Oh my God.
For 3 years and watching them sleep. He would say things to them.
Oh my God.
He would like but the thing is, this is one of the most terrifying interviews I've ever done. I was just at the edge of my seat, like, what in the flying fuck? Like, it was crazy.
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm getting chills like just hearing that. That's so terrifying.
For 3 years they dealt with that. He'd kick in the door when they weren't home and come on in and steal, like, take stuff. He would like take things out of the fridge and hide it around the house because, again, the parents are blind, so he was like just messing with them.
What's the purpose of this? Because I was thinking like stalking, like some guy likes a woman and he's pursuing it. But what's the purpose of this?
Well, I think the purpose was, and why they eventually had to end up moving or whatever. I think the purpose was to watch their little girl. They felt that he was trying to, do things to the little girl because he would mostly sit in her room and watch her sleep and stuff. But they would call the police all the time. But the police were like, oh, your kids are just making this up. You can't see anything. And now it's before there was like cameras on cell phones and stuff. And they would put cameras up and the guy would just come in and take them, because it was still back in the day where the camera you couldn't watch it on your phone.
Sure.
It wasn't like that kind of technology. And so like something like that could never happen today. There's too much technology to let that happen. So it goes both ways,
Yeah. No,
long story for like a short.
Yeah. Yeah. So you in general live kind of a unique life. In comparison to, you talked about your parents living more of a traditional, you get a job and you work it life, to you, who you travel when you want to travel, you pursue things that interest you. What was the catalyst for that in your life?
My parents worked really hard all the time. And I don't think that they ever, like, we took, little vacations and did things, but they never like went to other countries. They have in recent-ish years, they've gone to Mexico. They came back alive. But they never, went far away places and stuff. They were like family people, and we didn't have the money to take 3 kids to, Asia or Europe or anything like that. And so I saw them work so hard, and I was just like, I can't be indoors. I can't sit there and have someone tell me what to do. And I've tried to work those jobs. I remember, like in high school, I worked in retail in the mall, and it was like pure hell. Like I remember having to walk into the mall, and like the lights were like, there's no windows in the mall. Like I remember just feeling like I was going to cry every single time I had to go there. And I didn't have a lot of options because I was like 16 and had to work. And I was just like, I'm never, ever doing this again. I can't be indoors doing this. Like, it's just never going to happen for me. And I looked into like working for the Forest Service and like all these things. And I mean, just anything to not be indoors. And then luckily I just figured out that the creative aspect was kind of my way to go. And just make my own path. That's the only way I could do this.
Yeah. So, I think a lot of people right now, post-COVID, are trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. And some people are realizing that they don't want to go back to the previous environment that they held. and they're pursuing different interests. Do you have any advice for somebody kind of making that leap, either in entrepreneurship or trying to figure out where they want to go in this phase of their life?
Yeah, I mean, just go for it. I think that COVID, the whole quarantine thing, all of that really proved to society that we don't have to go sit in an office all day. You know, we can be just as productive in anywhere. I trust me, when I travel, I still work. I have deadlines. I have a casting company. I've got 3 different commercials today that I'm working on, you know, and it's every day like that. And so, but I can do that at the beach. I can do it from my phone. I can do that from my iPad, you know, like there's so many options. And even in fact, I want to say it was like a month ago that I went to Guatemala. Like that was one of the first times I literally took 24 hours where I couldn't answer my phone because I climbed up a volcano and there was no phone service. And I did it on a weekend, but other than that, like I'm always on my phone while I'm traveling. I mean, with a reasonable, not always, but you know, with a reasonable time frame so that I can get all my work done while I travel. I think that people can do that if you just put it in your mind and like do it, you know? Like I used to not be a super happy person. I was in a horrific relationship for many years. And when that ended, I was sad for a minute and like only for a minute. And then I was like, you know, I was so unhappy for years that it just became normal to be unhappy. And then I would wake up. This is so lame, but it works. So it worked for me. So I would wake up and I would just look like crap because I was so sad and like upset. And I had been sad and upset for years. I wake up and I'd look in the mirror and I would practice smiling because I couldn't like get it together like that. Right. So I would sit there and practice smiling all the time. And then eventually I started just waking up and being like, well, shit, I'm just like smiling now. And when you start doing that, you just kind of automatically get happier, I guess. I mean, I literally had to go back and choose happiness. And part of that too, like it goes into like doing what I want. Like I just had to make it work, figure it out. But I think a big portion of that is like choosing to be happy. I think happiness is a choice.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you. People make excuses all the time, but they don't prioritize the things that they want to do in this life, or they think eventually I'll get to it at some point in the distant future, right?
Yeah, and there is. I mean, you're not guaranteed 5 minutes from now, 10 minutes. You know, nothing's guaranteed. So I really take that whole like live for the moment thing seriously.
No, that's great. So you travel a lot, and I just got back from India, and I think it was life changing. And just the people there are completely different than the Western world. The way that they interact with each other, the love for each other, it's very different.
Yeah.
And I think if more people traveled, they would have experiences like this. But you can't understand it until you're there, and it's one of those things where you see it in movies, you see like actors or business people, and they travel and they get back and they say, oh my God, it was life-changing and all that, and you're like, yeah, what did you do though? Did you go out in the desert and do some peyote and that's why it was life-changing? Or like, what was it? But no, just being in the environment, being around the people just broadens your perspective on it. And have you found the same thing in your own life, that you just have a different view on life as a result of your traveling?
Completely. The more I travel, the more like minimalist I become, I think. Like I just have like less things in my house. I don't need things. I collect rosaries, which is strange, I know. But I love them. So I collect them from most countries because some countries are not it's very hard to find a rosary. But a lot of countries that I go to have rosaries. But they're very small, and that's the only thing I really have in my house these days. Are these rosaries, which is, I think it's a little disturbing for some people. I think it's great though for me. but yeah, I feel like you don't need things. Like, you need to expand your mind. You need to give your mind something to do. It's kind of like, this is gonna sound super weird, but I swear I'm going somewhere with it. It's kind of like my dog, because when he's bored, that's kind of sad for him, right? Like, he's just like laying around, like I can give him a bone or something and he'll chew his bone and lay around. But when I'm like giving him things to do, like, okay, sit and you get a treat, like randomly training him, he's like so much happier because he's doing something with his mind, right? And so I was like, okay, well, that makes complete sense. Like, dogs are a little more simple than humans in their thinking, I think. So if he gets that much joy out of sitting for the 120th time, because it's like something different in that moment, and he's only living for that moment, then I can do the same thing. So I'm like, all right, I will go jump out of a plane in Maui. I will climb an active volcano in Guatemala. I'm going to Nicaragua on Friday. I plan on volcano boarding, which is like snowboarding, but down a volcano. Seems scary, but
Holy smokes. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah,
seems cool. I'm trying to work it into my schedule. I think I've got it there. So that's the plan. But it's like something totally different in that moment for my brain to be like, oh wow. And I don't get the same feeling if I like buy something. If I buy a new outfit, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, that's great. Like, it doesn't give me the same feeling where, like, you know, climbing up an active volcano, no one gives a shit what you're wearing, except it was very, very cold, so I had to wear a lot of clothes.
Yeah,
you know, that I just like, I feel like I've trained my brain to be like, you know, be happy for these things rather than these things. And I think also, like we were saying earlier, when you're in countries that are more poor, they don't even they don't care about like what you're wearing or who has the cool whatever. They want to say hi and like talk to people and like be in that moment, and like that's exciting, you know. And they're you know, more of those countries, they meditate more, they, you know, they feel differently about things than we do. And I think that that's just so important to look at. Like, sure, they're poor, but are they, you know, are they poor?
Yeah.
They can't buy the new iPhone, or are they doing a hell of a lot better than we are because they meditate twice or three times a day and they're in touch with themselves and their feelings and other people's feelings, you know?
Yeah, poor. I mean, it depends on where your priorities are. If they're on, you know, monetary items and physical things, or if it's on people and your relationships with them. I mean, that's kind of a different experience.
Yeah, I mean, whatever makes you happy at the end of the day is what makes you happy. I just think for me, like, it's not things.
Yeah, and I think being a well-rounded person is taking in all the different perspectives. In business, I deal with people a lot, and so I want to understand people, the people I'm dealing with, who I'm talking to. And if I'm only looking at that from one little corner of the world, I'm only reading one chapter of a pretty thick book. And so getting out and seeing different cultures and people and religions and everything else out there helps me become a more rounded human being. And
I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the people making the comments about like, oh, everybody that goes to Mexico dies. Like, no, you've never been to Mexico, obviously, because you're still alive. So, I mean,
yeah,
you know, people are commenting on things they just have no idea about. And you know, I think our society is running like that lately, and it's scary.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with social media and Google and everything, they've talked about how it's an echo chamber, right? So you only see things on Google or social media that interests you.
Right.
So you're just getting a very, now even more so than before, you're only getting a really narrow vision of the life or of the world. When you search for something, you're only getting things that are of your little narrow version of the world. And the only way you can break out of that really is to travel and see different things, new things, and be uncomfortable.
Yes.
Being uncomfortable, I think, is so, so important. And, you know, like if you're working out at a gym, you are forcing yourself to be uncomfortable. If you're not, then you're not doing it right. But that's the only way your muscles grow. And I think our brains are the same way. It's kind of elaborating on what you just discussed.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're not challenging your brain and putting it in environments that are uncomfortable, then your brain's not growing. And what's it doing if it's not growing? Well, it's atrophying.
Yeah. I mean, lately I've been trying to do these kind of crazy adventure things, which is like not usually my MO. But lately I've been doing that, and I think it's because I just needed the extra okay, I've been to these places where I've never been before, and I've walked around, I've done this and that. Like, what can I do that's a little bigger? Like, what can I do that's a little bigger? And I'm not doing anything like crazy dangerous. I mean, to me, it's not crazy dangerous. Like, I don't feel like my life is in danger, jumping out of a plane or standing on an active volcano, or going down one on a weird wooden board. Maybe it is, but I do always check to see how many people died doing it before I do.
Nice. So you have the data at least.
I do. No one's died volcano boarding.
Oh, that's great.
A lot of people have died being on active volcanoes. It happens.
It happens.
It does happen.
So let's shift a little bit because you are a successful entrepreneur, and I want to hear what your philosophy is on being a successful entrepreneur.
Well, I think you just have to keep trying things, and you're gonna keep failing until one of them doesn't. Which I know I've heard that before. People say that, and I've always been like, no, that's dumb. Until I was like, well, fuck it. Like, I'm just gonna go out and try whatever I want, which is part of the reason the Boyfriend Bikini came out. I've always wanted to just like, I'm gonna be a bikini designer, which is super random and has nothing to do with true crime or all the other things I'm interested in. Except it does have a lot to do with traveling, because I mostly wear bikinis when I travel. I love tropical places. And I have been, talking about it and thinking about it for so long. Like, one day I'm going to have a bikini company. And I was like, why am I saying one day? Like, I'm going to do this shit today. Got online, found a designer out of France. I told her what I wanted. She's awesome. She, helped me put it together, because I don't know anything about patterns or anything else whatsoever. And she schooled me a lot on things, because I was like, do it like this. She's like, yeah, you can't. Like, it has to fit people.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And then I researched until I found a couple different manufacturers I liked. And right now I'm in the phase where I'm waiting for samples to come back from the 2 top manufacturers that I liked. I'm super excited. I'm like over the moon. Like, they're going to be here any day, hopefully before I go to Nicaragua. I don't know. One is one's in Bali and one is in Jakarta. The company. So I'm very excited about that. They have, great material that they're working with, paying a little extra for that, because I think that kind of stuff is important. And yeah, I mean, I could totally fit, like, maybe no one will ever buy a bikini, and whatever, I'll have hundreds of extra bikinis. I already have 100 bikinis upstairs, that is one thing I buy a lot of, is bikinis. I love them. And so, it could fail or maybe not. I've read about lots of people who made millions of dollars, and that's not really my goal. My goal was, at the end of the day, my goal is to be like, I have a bikini company and I made the perfect bikini that I always wanted. There's one style. It's the one I wanted, and that's it. So yeah, it could fail or it could be a success. But if I don't ever do it, I'll never, ever know, which everyone says that, and I hate saying that, but it's so true.
Yeah, 100%. I could agree with you more. Yeah. Well, Jaimie Beebe, thank you for your time today. For everyone listening, how do they get in touch with you? How do they follow what you got going on?
Instagram. I put everything on Instagram. Pretty much like all the fun parts of my life I put on Instagram. My Instagram is feathergirl77, like feathers, like a bird, feathergirl77. My Instagram for the podcast is Strictly Stalking Pod, and you can listen to the podcast anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Podcast One puts it out, which they're an awesome company. I love them. The Boyfriend Bikini, I just started the Instagram. I think it's the Boyfriend Bikini. And that's kind of where we're at. I have an Instagram I just made it. And I don't remember it for the new podcast. So that one's not really active yet. Not until I start putting it out there. So we'll see.
All right, great. Well, thank you for listening to the Success Is Podcast. Well, thank you guys for watching today. Be sure to like and subscribe for more future episodes of Success Is Podcast. If you have any suggestions, please comment below. Look forward to seeing you next time.